My children want me to sell the house I inherited to pay off their debts, but now they're calling me because they need a mother after cutting me off for not letting them extort me with their demands. This might sound a bit complicated, but I need to vent because honestly, I don't know if I'm being a bad mother or if my children are simply out of touch with reality. Here's the full story. I have 2 children of whom I am very proud. They worked really hard to get into good universities and earn their degrees. When I say good universities, I don't mean the community college around the corner, nothing wrong with that, by the way, but those prestigious universities that appear in magazines, boasting alumni who are now presidents of major companies. You know, the kind where the golden letters on the diploma practically glow in the dark. Both my ex-husband and I did everything we could to help our children pay for their education. We gave what we could, as much as our incomes allowed. We made sure to cover part of the tuition and their most immediate expenses. But let's be realistic, neither of us is a millionaire. In fact, I'm an average woman who's worked her entire life, just like my ex. So it's no surprise that my children had to take out student loans to cover the rest. It's not that we turned our backs on them, it's just that there's a limit to what one can do. It's important to note that my children now have good jobs. Yes, they're still paying off their student loans, which is not unusual at all. I went through the same thing when I went to university, and I eventually paid it off. It's an annoying situation, but most people from my generation, and certainly theirs, know that student loans are practically part of the landscape when you choose higher education. So, I understand, but I also believe that if I did it, they can do it too. It's just a matter of time, especially since their incomes will only improve as time goes on. Now, recently, my mother passed away. It was very hard for me because, even though she was older and we knew it would happen eventually, losing a loved one always hurts. As part of her inheritance, she left me her house. It's a lovely house, and while it's not a mansion, it's a cozy, well-maintained home, with a market value of around $350,000. Honestly, I don't plan to sell it because it's the place where I grew up, and I also want to have a secure roof over my head in my old age. Besides, I don't plan on dying anytime soon, in case my kids are hoping for that, just kidding, I think. Well, here's where the funny part of my story begins. My children, the same ones who now have good jobs and who have always respected and understood me, or so I thought, have started asking me to sell the house. And they haven't done it shyly, as one might imagine when asking for something that's clearly inappropriate. No, they've practically been demanding their share. Yes, they've called it their share. The first time they mentioned it was quite casually, during a family dinner. I was talking about how I might move into my mother's house over time since it needs some repairs, and how I was feeling about it. Then, my eldest son, with a sideways smile, said something like, "Well, Mom, maybe you could sell it and help us with our debts." He said it as if he were suggesting that I simply buy extra milk at the grocery store, just that simple. I laughed because I thought it was a joke. Wrong answer. My other son quickly chimed in, "Seriously, Mom, it would be a huge help. You've got a house worth $350,000. If you sell it, you could give us enough to pay off our student loans once and for all." I still couldn't believe what I was hearing, so I said something like, "Sure, I'll sell the house and then move into the doghouse." Sounds perfect. Honestly, I thought I was making a funny joke, but things got tense. My kids were looking at me as if I had said something incredibly insensitive. And that's when a series of arguments began that have frankly left me questioning whether I actually raised these human beings. They think selling the house would be a financially responsible decision. According to them, student debt is an overwhelming burden that's just holding them back. And that by not selling the house, I'm being selfish because I'm not helping them get out from under that burden. Apparently, having a house worth $350,000 sitting there while they struggle with their debt is something they can't tolerate. I tried reasoning with them. I explained that this house isn't just any property, it's my home. It's where I grew up, and where I want to live when I'm older. I told them that selling it now is not an option because I need to have something secure for my retirement. I mean, what am I supposed to do when I retire? Live under a bridge? But no, that's not enough for them. My children, these young adults with well-paying jobs, think they should get their share now because they deserve it. They asked me to think about all they sacrificed in taking out those loans. Sure, they only sacrificed, as if I hadn't spent thousands of dollars helping them in the first place. My ex-husband and I contributed around $50,000 total to cover their education, and that's no small thing for us. It might seem like little money to some people, but to us, it's a significant amount. I told them what I thought was fair: when I die, they can have their share. After all, the house will be part of their inheritance. But that's the problem, according to them, I'm not dead yet. Basically, my children want me to sell the house now so they can use the money and live debt-free. Apparently, they don't care that I have no plans of dying anytime soon. Of course, they've also complained to their father, my ex-husband, hoping that he would somehow side with them. But he's been absolutely clear with them, the house is mine. He can't do anything about it, and besides, he agrees with me that I shouldn't sell it. He's supported me in this, saying that we've done a lot for them already, and now it's their responsibility to manage their finances like adults. Luckily, even though we're no longer together, we've always had a good relationship. It's not that I don't empathize with my children. I know student debt is a burden, and I understand the pressure of having to make payments month after month. But I also know they have good jobs and that eventually, they'll pay everything off. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen, just like it did for me. Plus, both of them are in careers with great growth potential. The more they advance professionally, the more money they'll make, and in a few years, those debts will be nothing but a bad memory. I've tried explaining all of this to them, but it seems they don't understand. Or they don't want to understand. To them, the fact that I have a house and am not selling it to give them the money is, in their words, selfish. I'm still reeling from the shock of hearing that word come out of their mouths. I still don't understand why they think I'm obligated to sell the house. I've tried to be fair with them, I've tried to explain the importance of having a safety net, but they only see the money I could get if I sold the house. So here I am, because I'm certain I'm not the villain, but at the same time, they're acting as if I am. So, am I wrong for not wanting to sell my house to help them with their debts? Update 1. I want to start this update by thanking everyone who commented on the original post. I've been overwhelmed by the amount of support and understanding I've received. Honestly, reading the comments made me feel validated in my decision. It's not that I don't want to help my children, but there are limits, and it seems most of you understand that. However, one comment in particular caught my attention from someone who, very politely, expressed that perhaps I was in the wrong for refusing to sell the house and not helping my children with their debts. I wasn't really upset by the comment itself, since I appreciate honest opinions, but it did make me reflect on the situation a bit more. To that person, and to anyone else who might feel the same way, I want to clarify something. If I were to sell the house to cover my children's student debt, I'd be left without a home of my own and without the money necessary to secure my retirement. I'm not wealthy, and I'm not close to retiring with a comfortable fund. I've worked hard my entire life, but after the divorce, things have been more difficult financially. Additionally, after having invested a good portion of my savings into my children's education, I don't have a substantial reserve left for emergencies or for the years when I won't be able to work. It's not that I'm hoarding money or property out of greed or because I don't want to see my children debt-free. In fact, I'd love to help more, but it's not as simple as selling the house, giving them the money, and leaving myself without a roof over my head. Sure, I can keep renting for now, but when I'm older, money won't be as plentiful, and not having the added burden of rent will be a huge relief for my finances. As I mentioned in my original post, my children are young adults with good jobs, and they have their whole future ahead of them to pay off those debts. If sacrifices need to be made, I believe it makes more sense for them to do it since they have more time and resources ahead of them than I do. Now, several of you also asked how much my children actually owe, so I'll give more details to provide a better understanding of the situation. My eldest son, who has already paid off part of his debt, still owes around $75,000. He's been making steady payments, and with his current salary, he's making progress, though it's slow. My younger son, on the other hand, has a debt of approximately $100,000. These are fairly large numbers, I know, and it's not that I don't understand how overwhelming it can be to have that kind of debt hanging over their heads. But nothing that, with financial discipline and time, they can't handle. If I sold the house, I could cover a significant portion of those debts. Doing quick math, if I got the full market value for the house, which isn't always guaranteed in these situations, I could pay off both of their debts, but there wouldn't be much left for me to live on. After my divorce, I wasn't able to buy a house of my own due to other expenses, including what I invested in my children's education. Since the divorce, I've been living in different rentals, adjusting to what I could afford. Not owning a home has weighed heavily on me for years, especially after investing so much time and resources into things that haven't left me with a true sense of security. So now, having this house, even though it came from the sad circumstance of my mother's passing, makes me feel, for the first time in a long while, like I finally have a place to truly call home. It's my refuge, and the idea of selling it just because my kids don't want to sacrifice a few more years to pay off their student loans doesn't seem reasonable to me. Speaking of my children's jobs, I've said before that both have good positions, and I truly believe that. My eldest son is in a solid position, and while he won't pay off $75,000 in debt overnight, I think he's on a good path to significantly reduce it over the coming years. My younger son also has a promising job, though his debt is a bit larger. But he's just starting out, so he can't expect to earn six figures overnight. Heck, I don't even make that much. Both are in better positions than I ever was when I was younger, and I also had to pay off student loans. What's bothered me most about this whole situation is that, despite my attempts to explain my point of view, my children keep insisting that I should be the one to make the sacrifice for them. I've tried to be as empathetic as possible, to listen to their concerns, and to find common ground. I've even told them, as I mentioned before, that when I pass away, that house will be part of their inheritance, along with other things. But it seems that's not enough for them. I've come to the conclusion that this isn't just about money, but also about expectations and responsibilities. I think, at some point, my children will have to understand that adulthood means making tough decisions and accepting the consequences of those choices. They chose to attend expensive universities and pursue degrees that, while valuable, also come at a high cost. Now that they're in the process of paying off those debts, they need to take responsibility for it, rather than expecting me to sell the only thing I have to secure my future just to make their lives easier. Update 2. Honestly, I never thought things would escalate this far. Since my last post, where I was already dealing with the pressure to sell my house to pay off their debts, things have spiraled in a way I couldn't have imagined. What started as a series of tense conversations and disagreements about money has now resulted in an ultimatum that, if I'm honest, still leaves me stunned. After our last discussion, where I once again tried to explain my stance and why I wasn't going to sell the house, I thought things had calmed down, at least temporarily. However, instead of understanding or at least accepting my decision, my children decided to take things to an extreme. About a week ago, both of them gave me an ultimatum. And when I say ultimatum, I'm not exaggerating. They basically told me I had two options: either I sell the house and give them the money to cover their student debts, or they will cut me out of their lives completely. I can't even begin to describe what I felt in that moment. I was in shock, not knowing how to respond at first. It's one of those moments where your brain simply can't process what's happening because it seems absurd. My own children, whom I raised with love, were really asking me to choose between my financial security or having a relationship with them. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or scream. And the worst part is, they didn't say it impulsively or in the heat of an argument. No, it was completely premeditated. They both showed up together, as if they had rehearsed what they were going to say, and dropped it on me without a hint of remorse. My response was pretty immediate once I recovered from the shock. I told them that I would deeply regret them making such an extreme decision, but if the only way they could stay in my life was if I gave them money, then maybe it would be better for everyone if they moved on without me. It hurt to say that, and believe me, I said it with a knot in my stomach, but what other choice did they leave me? I'm not someone who wants to see my family broken, but I also can't accept that the only way to maintain a relationship with my children is to meet their financial demands. If the only way they'll accept me in their lives is under those conditions, then I wonder what kind of relationship we've really had all these years. Since I told them that, I haven't heard from them. It's been a few days, no calls, no messages, nothing. At first, I thought maybe it was just a tactic, a kind of emotional blackmail to make me change my mind, but now, after a week of complete silence, I'm starting to think they've actually decided to go through with the ultimatum. I can't deny that it's painful. As a mother, I've always tried to do what's best for them, and it's hard to accept that now they see me as disposable, just because I'm not willing to sacrifice the only thing I have to secure my future. It hurts to think that, after all these years of support and sacrifice, money is the only thing that seems to matter in our relationship. I know some people might think I should give in, that maybe this is a sign of desperation on my children's part, but honestly, I can't do it. Plus, giving in to this kind of ultimatum would only reinforce the idea that they can manipulate or condition our relationship based on what I can give them financially. And that's not the kind of relationship I want to have with them, or with anyone. Besides, today it's this, and tomorrow it will be something completely different they demand from me, maybe money for a house or to send my grandchildren to college. But with the dangerous precedent that they can use this tactic, knowing it worked in the past. Of course, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we got to this point. I've gone over every conversation, every interaction in my mind, trying to understand where things went so wrong. I always thought we had a good relationship, one based on mutual respect and unconditional support. I never imagined the day would come when they'd see me only as a source of money, and I wonder what I did wrong as a mother for them to feel entitled to demand from me in this way. Some of you might think there's hope, that eventually my children will come to their senses and realize how irrational their ultimatum is. I want to believe that too, but for now, I can't do anything but wait. I can't chase after them or beg them to come back. That's not the solution. If they return, it has to be because they truly want to have a relationship with me, not because they want to keep arguing about money or what I can or can't do for them financially. I've spent the past few days reflecting on what it means to be a mother at this stage in life. In the beginning, when your children are young, you give everything you have to raise them, to help them become decent and self-sufficient people. But there comes a point where you also have to set boundaries, and this is my boundary. I've done what I could for them, and now it's their turn to face their own challenges without expecting me to solve everything for them. I believe that's part of becoming an adult, and while it's painful to see them reject that, I have to stay firm. I don't know what else to say at this point, except that I'm moving forward, hoping that one day my children will understand my position. Hopefully, with time, things will change, and we can reconnect on better terms. But for now, they've made their decision. Update 3. It's been 5 years since I last wrote here, and honestly, I never thought I'd come back. Back then, when my children gave me that ultimatum, I thought it would be the last time I had anything significant to say about my relationship with them. But life has a strange way of surprising you, and here I am again, because something unexpected has happened. My eldest son has reached out to me. It's been 5 long years, and in some ways, very lonely ones. During this time, many things in my life have changed, but the most notable thing has been what hasn't happened. My relationship with my children never healed. Just as I feared in my last post, my children really did cut me out of their lives completely after that ultimatum. Accepting that reality was hard at the time, and it still is. It wasn't just losing them, it was also losing everything that comes with being part of their lives, missing important moments, the milestones a mother hopes to share with her children. Over these years, I've tried to move on, but that doesn't mean it hasn't hurt deeply. Among the things I missed was, for example, my eldest son's wedding. That's right, he got married, and not only that, he also had a child, my grandchild. But I wasn't there for any of it. I wasn't invited to the wedding, I wasn't part of that significant moment in his life, and I haven't met my grandchild. I found out about all of this through my ex-husband, who, fortunately, never stopped keeping me informed about what was happening in their lives. He's always been on my side, constantly telling our children that their estrangement from me made no sense, that too many years had passed and they should make amends. His message was consistent: she's your mother, and life is too short to stay estranged over a financial disagreement. But until now, my children weren't willing to speak to me. They couldn't forgive me for not giving in to their demands for money. However, something has changed, at least with my eldest son. A little over a week ago, after all this time without contact, I got a call from him. When I saw his name pop up on my phone screen, it felt like I was seeing a ghost. After so long, I didn't expect him to call. In fact, it took me so long to process what I was seeing that I didn't answer the first time. I was paralyzed. In a matter of seconds, years of resentment, pain, and sadness flashed through my mind. I didn't know what to expect or how to react. Finally, he called again, and this time, I decided to answer. The conversation was awkward at first. I felt like I was talking to a stranger, someone I used to know well, but who now seemed like a complete stranger. However, he got straight to the point. He told me that his life was in a really difficult place and that he needed his mother. He wasn't calling for money, he made that clear right away, but because he was going through a personal issue that had left him devastated. To keep it short, he told me his wife had been unfaithful, and now he had serious doubts about whether the daughter they had together was actually his. He was waiting for the results of a paternity test, and in the meantime, he didn't know what to do or how to handle the situation. Throughout the conversation, I tried to stay calm and listen. Even though I wouldn't have admitted it at the time, part of me wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay, and that I'd help him through it. But there was another part of me, the hurt part, the part that had spent years dealing with the pain of being cut out of my children's lives, that couldn't stop remembering what he had done to me. After all, where was he when I needed him? For years, he had ignored me, excluded me, left me out of the most important moments of his life. When he finished telling me his situation, there was an uncomfortable silence. I could feel the desperation in his voice, the sadness. And while I deeply regretted what he was going through, because going through something like that is never easy, I couldn't help but feel conflicted. Finally, I told him that I was sorry for his situation, that it wasn't easy to go through something like that, but there wasn't much I could do for him. For years, he hadn't considered me his mother, so I didn't see why I should drop everything in my life now to be there for him when he had left me out of his. My son, surprised by my response, said he was willing to apologize for everything that had happened. He admitted that what they did was wrong and that he should never have cut me out of his life over a money issue. He confessed that, in fact, he had almost paid off his entire student loan debt, he only had $12,000 left, so he didn't need my money anymore, he just needed his mother. However, I told him that his apologies didn't change anything. I told him he had made a decision years ago, and unfortunately, that decision had consequences. I asked him not to call me again. After hanging up, I spent days thinking about that conversation, but I'm not sure I can simply forget everything and go back to being the mother I used to be. That's why, after much thought, I've come to the conclusion that I can't have a relationship with my eldest son again. What's happened can't be undone, and while I appreciate his apology, I'm not sure that's enough to repair all the damage that's been done. As for my younger son, he hasn't contacted me at all during this time. I don't know anything about him, and I don't expect to hear from him anytime soon. I've heard bits and pieces about his life through my ex-husband, but that's the only way I've stayed informed about what's going on with him. I haven't received a single call or message from him. Nothing. Update 4. This will be a brief update. My son has respected my wish not to call me again since our last conversation. However, I did speak with my ex-husband. He still maintains a consistent relationship with our children, and he called to update me on a few things. He told me that the paternity test results finally came in, and indeed, my eldest son is the father of his daughter. Despite that, as my ex had mentioned earlier, my son is moving forward with the divorce. The infidelity is something he couldn't forgive, and it seems the situation has been really hard for him. During that same conversation, my ex and I talked about my decision not to have contact with our son. He told me, very sincerely, that ultimately it's my choice, and he will support whatever I decide to do. He hasn't tried to pressure me or make me feel guilty, which I truly appreciate. Even after speaking with him, I'm still standing by my decision. I won't change my mind. If my children chose to cut me out of their lives all these years, I don't see why I should disrupt my life for something I never asked for. It doesn't affect me to remain without contact, at least not more than it already has. In some ways, I've grown accustomed to this new normal, and for now, I prefer to keep things just as they are.